Welcome, everyone. I'm Kelli Roisman, and for the past year, I've been the chair of the student chapter of the Society of American Archivists here at SJSU. We do have a new team who will be leading the chapter for the new academic year. I'd like to introduce Kimberly Johnson, our guest presenter today, who's joining us from Louisiana. She works for the Archdiocese of New Orleans. She's a certified archivist, and she's going to talk about not only preparing for the ACA exam, which is coming up in August, but also giving us some background about what it means to be a certified archivist. This will be very helpful to a lot of people here who I know are looking for information and considering whether this is something they want to pursue. Welcome, Kimberly.
Okay, so hello everybody, I'm Kimberly Johnson and I'm here today as a representative for the Academy of Certified Archivists, or the ACA. Today I will be talking about the ACA, how to become a certified archivist, what a certified archivist does, the certified archivist exam, and exam prep. So let me tell you a little bit about me. After getting my bachelor's in education, I taught abroad in South Korea and then back in New Orleans. I had applied for and been accepted into a master's program in education, but I had decided that instead I wanted my master's to focus on history because I planned on teaching history at a college level. To be honest, archives and records were not on my radar when I started my master's program in history. In fact, I'd never been to an archives and it was not something I knew much about. In my first semester, we took a class trip to the university library archives, and I remember calling my dad that night and telling him I got to touch a minute book from 1850. I was really excited. In the beginning of my second year, one of my classes had a guest speaker, Dr. Emily Loomis, the Director of Archives and Records at the Archdiocese of New Orleans. My classmate and friend had interned there as an undergrad, and she told me that she would work there after grad school. Little did I know that I would too. By the time I completed my graduate program, I knew I wanted to work in the archival field. I started as a records clerk for a company that handles senior housing for the Archdiocese. After about 6 months, I was offered a job in the Office of Archives and Records as a processing archivist records analyst. So let me give you a little background on where I work. The Office of Archives and Records serves as the official repository for the records of the Archdiocese of New Orleans, so basically the Catholic Church in and around New Orleans. We support the larger mission of the Archdiocese. My office is responsible for developing and monitoring the efficient records management program and for identifying, collecting, describing, protecting, and making available the historical records of the Archdiocese. The present Archdiocese of New Orleans includes 8 civil parishes. A parish is just a county, which are all within the greater New Orleans area. In addition to housing materials for these civil parishes, the archives also handles Louisiana-wide material from earlier periods when the archdiocesan boundaries included all or most of the state and the Floridas. I'm sorry, it's not letting me change again.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, but that's backwards. Okay. Okay. You can see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, here's a little historical context about the Archdiocese and its origins. In 1718, when Bienville, governor of Louisiana, founded the city of New Orleans, some sources claim he used his sword to trace the site to be occupied by the parish church, which would become the St. Louis Cathedral. That is where the history of what would become the Archdiocese of New Orleans started, as well as when the records we hold began their life cycle. So what do I do? As a processing archivist, I process records by surveying, arranging, describing, and performing basic preservation activities on recorded material. But that is just one small part of my job. We have a museum, which I help curate exhibits mostly from our collection, and this is a picture of the museum. It's in the old Ursuline convent in the French Quarter. We digitize current and historical records. We provide certificates of sacramental certificates of like baptism and marriage for historical, genealogical, citizenship purposes, as well as for personal records. We host academic researchers. We do research within our records for infinite purposes, and we lend our holdings to other museums for exhibits. I've also presented at a conference. I recently created a new website for our department. On our site, you can access all our Sacramento records from 1718 to 1815. Our website also has virtual exhibits of our past exhibitions. As a records analyst, I handle and safeguard business records. We use a records retention schedule to determine timetables for transferring active records to inactive and a record's final disposition. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about the ACA. Simply put, the ACA provides an archivist a credential that certifies that they have archival skills, knowledge, and abilities. The ACA's purpose is to develop and administer a program of certification and certification maintenance for archivists in the United States and internationally, to increase knowledge of archival certification and its benefits within and outside the archival profession, and to promote among archivists the attainment of a high level of professional knowledge. Being a certified archivist helps employers know that you have the skills the position requires, and it can build confidence in your abilities. My boss encouraged me to take the Certified Archivist exam, and I was promoted to Senior Processing Archivist after I passed it. I would like to think that if I apply for a job and possess the same level education and have similar work history to another applicant, but they aren't a certified archivist, I would be the one to get the job because being a certified archivist sets me apart. Being a certified archivist shows that I have the skills required for the position. The Academy of Certified Archivists was established over 30 years ago. This is a timeline of their history. In 1987, SAASC Council created the certification after years of consideration and debate. In 1989, the Academy was established with 756 members. In 2009, the Academy reached a milestone with 1,000 people in membership. And in 2020, there are 1,300 certified archivists. Some employers only want certified archivists. All across the country, certified archivists are needed. From California to Florida and from North Dakota to Texas, certified archivist jobs can be found all across the United States. This is a breakdown of the types of places certified archivists work. It's not just libraries and universities. There are corporate archivists. Ford, Coke, and Apple all employ archivists. There are religious archives. Certified archivists work for nonprofits. Museums have archivists. Archivists Without Borders promotes cooperative efforts among archivists to provide aid and resources to countries whose documentary heritage is in danger of disappearing and/or suffering irreversible damage. There are government archivists. Even the FBI has an archivist, and my boss is friends with a past FBI archivist, and she's really friendly. There are some basic qualifications you need in order to take the test. I qualified under example number 2. I had a master's degree in another field and 2 years of qualifying experience. Qualifying experience needed to meet eligibility requirements must be professional work, as opposed to the kind of work that paraprofessionals or non-professionals typically do. Internships and volunteer work might qualify if it consists of the same kind of work a professional archivist does. For further clarification, you can email the exam administrator. If you are going to get a provisional certificate, you need a master's degree with an archival concentration, which means at least 3 archives-related courses. If you apply before graduating, you will have to prove that you have graduated before you can take the exam. This certification does not require professional work experience before taking the exam. Experience plus the certification fee is required to become a regular member in good standing. But after passing the exam, you'll have 3 years to earn that 1 year of professional experience that's required in order to become a regular member in good standing. There are 7 domains in the Certified Archivist exam. Domain 1 is selection, appraisal, and acquisition. Domain 2, arrangement and description. Domain 3, reference services and access. Domain 4, preservation and protection. Domain 5, outreach, advocacy, and promotion. Domain 6, managing archival programs. And Domain 7, professional, ethical, and legal responsibilities. The Handbook for Archival Certification can be found on ACA's website. It outlines what is covered in the exam as well as what base knowledge an archivist should possess. Please read the whole handbook for archival certification. It will answer most, if not all, of your questions. It is a little long, but really it's worth it. It really clears a lot of things up, or at least it did for me when I was applying. How is the exam created? A psychometrician leads 8 CAs on the exam development committee. They write questions that represent the different parts of the role delineation statement, or the RDS, to add to the bank of hundreds of questions. They then select 100 questions for the exam. Then a different group of CAs judge how difficult that set of questions is, which determine what the passing grade for that exam will be. Here's an example of how an exam question is developed. For Domain 4, preservation and protection, Task 3 is to ensure the correct long-term storage of records and papers by such techniques as using proper containers and encasements, using acceptable shelving, and maintaining acceptable environmental controls. The Knowledge Statement 402 says that archivists know and can apply knowledge about the causes and consequences of deterioration of various media and formats. The Exam Development Committee creates questions that test the understanding of each knowledge statement, but of course not all of them are selected for every exam. Okay, now it's time for what I'm sure you've all been waiting for, some test questions. So I had planned on being able to see what everybody was like raising their hand so we could kind of talk about like what people thought, but I can't actually see anyone. So just go ahead and take a look at A, B, C, and D and think about what you think that the right answer would be. I'm going to give you a few seconds and then we'll talk about the correct answer.
If you you can type your answer into chat if you want, everyone, and I'll read that out.
Okay, are we ready for the answer?
I think so, yeah, we should just go ahead with that. We've got a couple of different answers, but I for one, I don't know the answer. I'd love to find out.
Okay.
Kimberly, you're on mute, and I'm trying to unmute you.
Well, just that one, you know, yes, another leftover.
What is happening?
Kimberly?
No, nobody was there this time.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute because I can't access that while the presentation is going on. So it's okay. Like I unmuted and I'll just go ahead and get back to the slide I was on. And just
all right, sounds good.
The issues these people are having are hilarious. Oh my gosh.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, so right, the answer is D. It should be 26 degrees Fahrenheit and 20 to 30% relative humidity. All right, let's do another question. Which of the following categories of the government records is expressly covered by the United States Freedom of Information Act? Give everybody a second to think about that.
Okay, I think we can go ahead.
Okay, the correct answer to that question is B, the executive branch. And both of those questions were actually on the exam that I took. So these questions are provided by the ACA within that handbook that I had talked about. There's, I think, about 10-ish test questions, and some of them are actually on the test. And I guess that they kind of rotate the questions around as well as what's on the handbook, but it's definitely worth reading those and knowing the answers to those questions, because chances are at least one of them is going to be on your test. Okay, so how do we apply? You can go online or you can apply through the mail. Make sure you plan ahead because you need a few documents when you apply. So make sure to give yourself time to prepare and acquire the required documents. So the ACA recently announced that the application deadline has been extended to June 5th. So make sure you take advantage of that if you were thinking about it, but you didn't think you had enough time to get things ready. Now you have a bit of an extension. The application fee for this year's test will be $52, but if you're planning on taking the test next year, plan ahead and you can utilize the early bird discount pricing. It's half price. And if the test isn't going to be offered online, which we'll get into in a minute next year, then if you do early bird, you can also have a better chance of getting your site selection. You only need 3 people to select the same site if you're doing early bird, and if you do the later application deadline, then you'll need 5 people. So that's just something to think about. So like I mentioned, this year's test will be online. No final decision has been made, but it might be an at-home test. The ACA should be releasing the final determination soon about if it'll be at home or if you'll have to go to a testing center. So, preparing for the exam. To prepare for the exam, you should read broadly in the professional literature. The Handbook for Archival Certification, which is available as a PDF at ACA's website, has a list of suggested readings. This list is to assist you in preparing for the exam, but it is not a complete list of the sources used to create the exam. It does include the most significant materials used for creating it. You'll have 3 hours to complete the exam, and it consists of about 100 questions. I think it took me a little over, I think it was about 2.5 hours. So, you know, use your time wisely while you're in there for sure. I recommend that you start reading now, you know, focus on the domains that you're least familiar with, but you should study all of the domains. So I asked a couple of recent certified archivists to write a paragraph about the exam and what study materials they suggested for future test takers. One said that the best resources for preparing for the certified archivist exam are fellow archivists that have already taken it. Professional organizations were the perfect place to meet certified archivists and do not require any specific credentials to join. She was able to meet local CAs through professional associations and was able to speak with several through the Society of American Archivists discussion boards. She highly recommended SNAP, Students and New Archive Professional section, as it was a great place to ask for CA resources. These fellow archive professionals were able to share condensed study guides and were able to point out both core and niche concepts that were covered on the test. Another certified archivist who learns best from paper format recommends making a reading plan a few months in advance. She utilized exam material passed down from someone who took the exam the previous year. She allotted 2 weeks per domain and would move on even if there was a few things she felt that she needed to better understand. She planned on an entire week at the end of her review period for one final broad overview of the more confusing parts of each domain. She also signed up to receive SAA's term of the day email, which was extremely helpful for quick reference. The most helpful part of her study process was ensuring that she had a number of study sessions and discussion groups with colleagues that were also studying for the test. For me, case studies were a good exam prep resource. They outlined scenarios and gave a solution to the situation, and these can be found at SAA's website. You can just put case studies in the search bar and they'll pop right up. So 1 or 2 months after taking the exam, you will get the results. It might be sooner this year due to the exam being online. Historically, the pass point for the exam varies a little from year to year depending on the difficulty of the questions. In recent years, the pass point for the exam has ranged from the 60s to the mid-70s, and the percentage of people who have passed the exam has ranged from the mid-70s to the mid-80s. So the application fee is $50, which is due at the time of application, or $25 for early bird. And the certification fee is $150, which is due within 30 days of notification that you pass the exam. So some membership requirements are take and pass the Certified Archivist exam, pay the certification fee, keep current on annual dues and certification maintenance. Every 5 years, ACA members must recertify by exam or by petition. If you are going to recertify by petition, I recommend keeping a log on your computer of everything you do that counts for points towards recertification. Conventions, webinars, training videos, an officer position in an archival group, even this presentation will give you points towards your recertification. Some benefits of an ACA membership include volunteer and leadership opportunities, support for professional development and career development, and the ACA maintains a list of employment opportunities that includes being a CA as a preferred requirement. Here is some links for the ACA. I'll provide these to your professor so that she can distribute them. And this is some of ACA's contact information, also will be provided for distribution. So your professor had given me some questions that people had asked in the past, and I tried to incorporate most of those into the presentation itself, but some of them just didn't quite fit, and so I wanted to just go over those at this point. So the question was, for your job specifically, are you also responsible for active records, or do they have a records management program apart from the archival program? In either case, what type of skills does the ACA exam certify related to active records? Okay, so as far as, my department, the Office of Archives and Records, handles both archives management and records management. We have an integrated archives and records management program. My director is dually certified as a CA and as a CRM, a Certified Records Manager. So the Office of Archives and Records manages active records through retention schedules. However, every organization has differing policies and procedures for active and inactive records and who should be responsible for them. As far as what type of skills the CA exam certifies relating to active records, I think that the CA focuses on archival management, which is different from records management. Records management is certified by the Institute of Certified Records Managers, ICRM, which is an international certifying organization and for professional records and information managers. Although sometimes archival management and records management overlap, the certifications for each are separate. But because the stage of a record being active is part of the life cycle of a record, and all parts of a record's life are covered in the CA exam, part of my answer has to be that the ACA does certify skills related to active records. But you should read the ACA RDS and the Handbook for Archival Certification for more information on skills relating to active records, and you could always contact ACA with any questions that you might have. Does the ACA have a mentoring program? The ACA does not have its own mentoring program. However, starting this year, we will have our first Regent for Member Services, who will be looking at ways to improve connections between members and the Academy. Are there certain courses that you would especially recommend for preparing for the exam? Now, based off of just the title of the class and not knowing anything about the curriculum, I chose these 3 classes. I saw that some of the other classes focused on both records management and archival management, and I felt like if I was just really focusing on taking the CA, that I would probably want to focus on the classes that mostly were focused towards archival management and not records management, and that was part of why I chose these. But again, it's kind of hard for me to really know just basing it off of the title. Okay, so this is my contact information in case you have any questions or you'd like to reach out at any point. I'm happy to talk to anybody about the CA or anything having to do with working in the archival field. And I think at this point, we're going to open it up to some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. That was great. I really appreciate it, and I know everyone here does. We are going to have some questions. I have some myself, so I wanted to know a little more about your work at the Archdiocese and the types of materials that they collect and more of the whole history of that and what it's like to work in that environment.
Well, so we have a lot of differing stuff. We actually have 3 different locations, and at one location, which is like the main office for the Archdiocese of New Orleans, where the Archbishop works, we have a vault that within the vault there's a cage, and in the cage is where we keep all of our sacramental record books, which are original books that start in 1718 and then they go all the way through probably 2008 is the most recent book that we have. In general, we don't take in books that are less than 75 years old, so that the oldest record, the youngest record in the book being 75 years old. But in cases of Katrina, where some records were damaged, we did take over the damaged records and then we digitized those records. And so we still have the original, which have been like freeze dried or preserved or conserved in different ways depending on what the situation was. Like one of the churches left the books in a safe. We had to cut the safe open. So all that was a little tricky. And so now we hold both of the original book and the digitized copy. And so from those records, that's where we do the genealogy and the dual citizenship is a big thing that we do a lot of these days. And then also people just need them for their own records. If you're getting married in the Catholic Church, you have to present them with a baptism certificate. There's just so many purposes for those type of records in general. Also, one of the really neat things that I find in some of the older books is that there's like historical notes about things that were happening in the city of New Orleans. So for instance, there was a fire in the 1780s, and there's a record of the fire written by the priest of the church, and he writes about how he had sent some of the books to another location, and then the convent, which is where our museum now is, I showed that picture earlier, was burning, and the nuns came, and so he had no other choice but to take the remaining books and throw them out into the Plaza d'Armes, which is now Jackson Square, and the place where he sent the first set of books to, it burned, and the only books that we have left are the ones that he threw out the window of the cathedral, and he writes about that in the book. And so it's really fascinating to read about a historical event like from somebody who experienced it like right after it happened. So that's like a really neat thing. And so those are the kind of things that like researchers are really interested in. We get a lot of people that are writing books on stuff, and so that's kind of like our biggest part of our collection. And those books are just so numerous. They take up quite a bit of space. And so that's one part of what I do. And so then also the digitization of records that are in the field, because like I said, we only usually take in books if the oldest record in the book is, the youngest record in the book is 75 years old. And so since those are still in the field, we have to constantly go and have those digitized so that if anything happens, like another Katrina or a fire, anything like that, there's always like a backup digital copy that's mostly complete. I mean, clearly, if you're adding things to the book every day, there's no way to always have it ready unless you're digitizing it at a church level, and that's just not where we're at this moment. Okay, so that's one part of it. Then, I mean, like with researchers, it's just really, there's just so many things that they might need us for. We have somebody who's a dedicated research archivist, but we work together. And so that's like people writing in saying like, I'd like to come in, I want to look at this. And then it takes some time to look for those records, pull the records, see if those records are something that we can scan and send out. Is it something that they need to come in for? Making those appointments, you know, that's definitely part of it. And then there's always processing, right? We have so many boxes of things of just various nature, and there's lots of things that still need to be processed. So as time allows, it's going in the system, finding something that says it needs to be processed, pulling that box from the archives, and then looking at it and figuring out the best way to go about processing. I mean, that could be a lot of things, right? It could be by the page, it could be by the folder, it could be by the box. It's something that you have to just make judgments on, like as you're looking at the materials. So that's one part of it. Then also we do exhibits at the Ursuline Convent. And so that's a multi process. I really feel like I could just going on and on about the things that we do because they just vary so much. And I don't know if that's indicative of everybody in my field, but I certainly know other people that are archivists for like the public library, which is also the city archives. And they also have a lot of hats. But then I know other archivists that work like at the World War II Museum, and their work is a lot more like limited and focused. And so I think that it really just depends like where you work and as far as like the scope of what you'll be doing.
I wonder with the processing, how do you balance, does it happen mainly because people are asking for materials and then you're going to look for it and at that point try to get some of that, or is it more you have your own workflow?
I think it really is when time allows. And so there's a lot of other things that I'm responsible for, like the website, so if I'm trying to get this new website up and running, then processing is something that's kind of on the back burner, right? It's not like all the boxes, regardless of if they've been processed or not, they've been processed at least to the box level where it's in the system and it's able to be found through our database. We use Content Manager, but there's lots of different, software for you to use in that realm. So it's always available to be found, but as far as like if it's been processed to like a folder level, that's not the case when it comes in. And so as time allows, when I'm not working on the website or there's not an exhibit, then that's when I try to get as much processing done as I can. Or like it's possible maybe that there's something that's at the box level, but somebody needs to come in and see it and it needs to be processed down to a folder level so we can make sure that all those records are open to the public. And so that could be a reason why I might need to do it quickly, but honestly, that's something that rarely happens. It's usually just as time allows, and it's really, at least at my job, I'm kind of able to just pick and choose what I feel like processing because maybe it interests me, or maybe it's because it's something that I know that I've walked past the box a lot and I've wondered what's in there. I guess I'm lucky in that I do get some choice when it comes to what I want to work on.
Do you have other people on your team who do it similarly, where they're processing when they can along with the other things that they're doing?
So because of COVID, things have changed a lot, but like, let's just say like pre-COVID, there's another girl who also was a processing archivist, but she's only been there for like about 1.5 years or 2 years. And so since I'm the senior processing archivist, then I guess I will have more decision-making when it comes to maybe what I'm working on, but she is certainly doing the same thing. And then also the research archivist, even though her job is to focus on researching what people are asking for, as time allows, she can also process things when she isn't needed to be working on the research archivist typical duties. And I think that my boss is really passionate about like everybody being able to do everything, right? Even though I don't really handle most of the records management stuff, like I still have a good base knowledge of it. And like when I'm needed, I'm there to help with the records management side. So I'd say that that at our office, while everybody kind of has different things to do, that we all do the same things as needed.
Yeah. How large is your office and what are the positions?
So we have a director, and then we have a, let me see, his title is a little tricky. It's content records. It's basically a records manager who worries about everything that's like within the database. But even though he has that job, and he also works with IT. I mean, he is in our department, but because he's an electronic records manager, he also works with IT because he's doing electronic stuff, but then he also handles the Sacramento objects. Maybe because before he was the electronic records manager, he handled the Sacramento objects and is the best knowledge about it. So sometimes, even though your title is one thing, you still might be doing something else that's a little bit different than what your title usually would handle.
I
So,
think we
okay.
have some background noise. I'm muting. There we go.
Okay. So there was, so we had him, electronic records manager, my director, myself, another processing archivist, a research archivist, and then we also have someone that's called, we have something called Central Files, and it's basically all the active records of the current archbishop. So when he writes a letter or he receives a letter, it goes to Central Files, it's scanned and entered into our system, and so her job is just to handle those active records, and she's really the only person that just really stays in her lane and doesn't really do any of the other like processing archivist things or research archivist, or she just does her Central Files. So altogether then that's 6 people that are in the department.
I have a question from Barbara. Did you have an archives internship before taking on this job? What was your prior experience to it?
So it's funny because we had a lot of options on where we wanted to do our internship at, but I was very passionate about World War II growing up. It was this bond that me and my dad had, and there's a World War II museum in New Orleans that I've been to so many times, and I was just so inspired by it, and so I really wanted to do my internship there, but I actually ended up working in interning in the education department at the World War II Museum. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about them. Like, honestly, I love that museum, but it really made me realize that that wasn't the right place for me, because maybe I was, they were just so, I felt like the education department was so, it's like they didn't know that they were working at a museum of history, and it just bothered me in a way that I can't really describe. Like, they were all about STEM, and I know STEM is important, but like one time I was like, well, do you guys like have a history week of summer camp? And they were like, history? Who wants to learn about that in summer camp? And they like laughed, and I was like offended, and I just felt like maybe this isn't the right place for me. And that's actually how I ended up going to the Archdiocese. I guess sometimes you think that something is going to be perfect for you, but then when you get a chance to intern there, you realize that it's just not a good fit. And so, so while I was interning at a museum that has an archives, clearly, I didn't intern in the archives. I interned in education because that's what my undergrad was in. And in some ways, like, I do regret that now. I wish I would have done something that had more archives or records management, but in the end it all worked out. So, but I think that if you think that you want to go into the archival field or records management field, then push for that internship that gives you that chance to get your feet in the water, because I feel like it really lets you know if this is going to be the right job or career path for you.
Thank you. And we have someone asking about the person who's a research archivist. What is this person's duties?
So while she also does processing and she creates certificates and does genealogy, basically she's the one person, like, so if somebody emails in and is like, I'm interested in learning about Marie Laveau, I'd like to come in and do some research, then those emails go to her. She would then send them a researcher request form, which they would fill out. It would say, because we only allow like academic researchers. We don't, because we have a lot of older books, genealogists want to come in, but we don't have the space for genealogists. And also, like, our books are so fragile and delicate. If we just let anybody come in and flip through them, like, it would be hard for them to continue on, you know. And so for preservation and conservation purposes, we don't really allow people to just come in and look at them for that purpose. So she would then be the one that like sets up the appointment. She pulls all the things for you. She researches what we have on your topic. Then she'll send you an email and say, here's the things that we have. Are you interested in seeing this? If it's something that can be sent to them electronically, then she does that. If it's not, then she's there when they come. She pulls the different documents for them. She goes over the rules. She would then make any scans or copies that they'd like. If they need permissions for to publish, then she would handle that. And so that's kind of the duties that she has. But again, like if we don't happen to have a lot of research at the time, then she'll work on something else. She's worked on the exhibit with me. She does the digitization project with me. So while she is the one that mainly handles the researchers, she certainly has lots of other duties as well.
You were talking about one of the things you're working on now is the website. What are your aims with that? And
so we used to have a website that was a loan website, and the Archdiocese of New Orleans got a new company that you could basically, your website is linked to the Archdiocese website. And so it's like a whole different platform. And so I had to convert the things from the old website to the new, but we didn't just want to just transfer everything over. We wanted to make it more user friendly. So I took a lot of time researching different websites of different diocesan archives throughout the country to see how they had their set up, and then I put that together. And so one of our biggest things is the scans of the original books from 1718 to 1815. We wanted to get those up again, and we wanted those to be as user-friendly as possible. We had some problems on the other website where if you opened one PDF and you didn't close it out completely, that if you went to open another one, it just gave you back the one that you had already seen. It was a very strange glitch, and there was nothing we can do about it. So we wanted to make sure that that was fixed and more user-friendly. We wanted it to be easier for people to give us feedback. We just wanted it to be more easily accessible and user-friendly, whereas before there was a lot of constraints on the things that I could change. This new website had a lot of new possibilities. And so there was a lot of research that went into that, and then a lot of like testing with people at our office, with people other places to get their feedback on how they felt about it. And then also it was nice to be able to select like the pictures and the different information we were going to offer on the website. And so it's always like a fluid thing where we're trying to change it up as needed and as we get more feedback. But I felt like that was something that I really enjoyed because it was different. And in the past, I have done the virtual exhibits through Omeka, and we decided to not renew our Omeka subscription. And so I created our own virtual exhibits, like using the new website format. And so just, you know, things of that nature, kind of what has gone into this website recently.
I'm listening, and I understand now, are you a native New Orleans, or?
I am. I grew up across the lake, but it's still within like the greater New Orleans area. And I mean, I've lived in some other places, but I'm back in New Orleans now, and I live in New Orleans.
How important do you think that local knowledge is to your job, that local history? So
I think it's really important because of the way that our records are. Like, all of our original records from the early 1700s are going to be in French. Then we switch over to records that are in Spanish. Then even as we became within the United States, we still didn't do records in English for a long time. What happened at that point was that if people were of different from different countries, then they went to the Archbishop and said, like, well, we really want to hear Mass in German. So then we have German churches that their records are in German. We have records that are in Latin. And so I think that all those things kind of the background knowledge of New Orleans, it helps in understanding that. Also the spellings of the names are really different sometimes in New Orleans, but also realizing the history of the the French and then the Spanish and then like Irish, and like as immigrants were coming in and becoming priests, like, you know, if I'm a Frenchman and I'm saying my name to an Irishman, but I don't know how to actually spell my name, and the Irishman is just writing it out as he's hearing it phonetically, there's all these spelling alterations that as I'm researching to help people for genealogy or for dual citizenship, like I have to really be thinking about, you know, I'm French, I'm saying it to this Italian gentleman or this Irish gentleman, how might I have written it down, because it's not all, it's rarely the way that you think that it's supposed to be spelled. So I think that all that is helpful. And then especially like in doing exhibits, like this last exhibit we did about Catholicism, 300 years of Catholicism in New Orleans. I mean, you definitely need to have some knowledge of the history of the city and the way that it's intertwined with the church in order to get that message within the exhibit, you know. But I think that it probably is helpful to me, but it's nothing that couldn't be, you know, the other people that work with me, my boss is also from New Orleans, but the other girls, they're not. And I think that just reading and learning, and we did this wonderful tour of the St. Louis Cathedral where we went up in the bell tower and we went in the crypt. And I mean, so interacting and things like that and having a chance to like live in the history, I think it gives you some knowledge of the situation too. So while it does maybe give me a leg up sometimes, I don't think it's something that can't be overcome, like if you move to another city.
I think this ties in to a question here with how does an archivist have to relocate for the job?
I mean, I think that certainly people do. It didn't work out that way for me, so I can't say that I know a whole lot about it. But like certainly I know people that like I have a friend who is the archivist for Apple, right? And she originally lived in California, and then actually she told them that like her husband got a job in New Orleans and that she was going to move, and instead of her needing to get another job, they actually said to her, okay, well, we'll make this job where you can, you know, do it from home, and then you just have to come here to California for 1 week a month, and then we'll let you like remote in the rest of the time. So sometimes you don't even have to move these days, you know, you're able to just do it from wherever you live, and then just have to go into the office maybe like once a month or once every few months. But as far as like moving for a job, I honestly can't really speak to that too much, because it's not something that I had to do for this field.
I typed into the chat MLIS Skills at Work Snapshot Report. The SJSU iSchool publishes that every spring. I was the person who wrote that this year. I researched, I looked up 400 job postings over the course of several weeks and analyzed them. I highly recommend that you look at that report, because you'll see what the job titles are, what the skills and duties are that they're looking for. I also encourage you, everyone, to wherever you're at with your degree or your career, anything, just make it a regular habit to check the job sites. There are several, they are listed in that report, that are LIS specific. And scan those, you know, look at what people are looking for in terms of skills and what the duties of their jobs are, what you might be interested, you see that dream job there, well, what are they looking for? What do I have that I can check off? And what are the other things that they're looking for that perhaps I can develop skills in? And when does that come out again? Well, I just wrapped it up at the end of the semester, so it should be published, I believe, in the next couple of weeks. It is complete now. I wanted to ask Kimberly, unless anyone has another question, we should wrap this up. But one of my questions is, are you a member of SAA as well?
I am a member of SAA. I have attended that conference for the last 2 years, and then I was hoping to go to the one this year in Chicago, but clearly that isn't happening. But yeah, I really have enjoyed the SAA conventions that I've been to. I feel like I've gleaned a lot of things. That's how I met the archivist from Apple, who actually lives like 30 minutes from me, but I happened to run into her there. I've made some friends at different archives across the country. I find people to be very friendly there, and I've really have enjoyed it. I hope to present there. When I presented, it was for SA, and it was in Arlington a few years ago. But I would love to eventually present at SAA as well. My boss has done it several times, and I did do Archivist on the Hill with SAA 2 years ago, and that was really an amazing experience. We basically went to Capitol Hill and then like spoke to some members about funding for SAA and like in different things of that nature, and not funding for SAA, but for humanities and things of that nature. And it was really like an amazing experience. And honestly, anybody that has the chance to go, do it. I mean, there's a lot of grants out there for students, I think. And if you can, you know, go and be able to get it covered, I feel like it's worth it.
Yeah, thank you. They aren't having the, the conference in Chicago. They do plan to make it a virtual conference, but
Right.
they have not ironed out the details, and there is no information yet for how to register or how that will take place. We will be posting information on that on our social media and on our website, and try to get the message out to our iSchool, because it's unfortunate that the conference can't take place physically. On the other hand, it's a lot more accessible to people when it is virtual, because it's very expensive to travel. If you not
Yes.
few people have the means just to, for example, in in August, to pay for the plane ticket, the hotel, everything and registration fees. The virtual conference, I know that ALASC is having a virtual conference in June, and the registration fee is $60. So I'm guessing that SAA will have a registration fee, somewhere in that range, so it's a good idea if you can attend that.
I agree. I'm not sure, but because there's so many conventions that are now virtual, so I'm not 100%, but I thought I had read somewhere that SAA's was going to be discounted because it was virtual, and that made me happy because I was like, great, I'll still be able to do it. But honestly, there's, like I said, so many virtual conferences that I could be mistaking it with another, but I do think that that's a possibility, and it is a good chance for you to be able to participate without having to pay all that extra stuff, the room, the flights. I mean, I feel like both times I was there like 5 nights. I mean, it really adds up.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate you joining us, and it's been very informative. We have recorded this, and we will be posting it to our YouTube channel. That should happen in the next couple of days. Once we've got it up, I'll post it on Facebook, and also the link will be on our website so that you can find that and recommend it to others. It is very interesting. I think getting the certification is important for career development. As you said, if there are people applying for a job and someone has the CA and someone doesn't, it will definitely be an advantage to the person who does have that qualification, who can actually demonstrate their knowledge in the field.
Agreed. I really appreciate you having me. Like, I really enjoyed this. Like, thank you for the invitation. It's been a lovely time.
Well, thank you. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.